No, your brain is not deceiving you. If you feel as though Tottenham beat Man City a disproportionate amount of times in recent years, given where the two stand in the English football pecking order, you are correct. It is real. I've done the research to back this up, and Tottenham have a staggering advantage over Man City in this 2020s era. But that hasn't always been the case. Turns out that Tottenham and Man City have an identical record when it comes to the head-to-head, as in between 1909, their first game, and August 2025, their most recent game. Their record, both, is 69 wins, grow up, 37 draws, and 69 losses. And despite that, both teams have gone on insane streaks against each other where they've just not lost for years, even up to decades. So for them to be identical after all that now has to be studied. My name's Okosieme. You're watching OKO TV. Let's get straight into it. So kick back, relax, subscribe as I take you through the 4 phases of this Man City Tottenham rivalry, which has some staggering results. Phase number 1, the First Division era. Prior to the Premier League's inception in 1992, the English top division was known as the First Division or Division 1. And Tottenham and Man City were evenly matched throughout this period. In fact, they both had their highest successes of the century around the same time in the 1960s. But what followed for Man City was a bit more stability. For Tottenham was a fall off. A big fall off, in which they ended up getting relegated to the second division in 1977. Meanwhile, Man City, they were still doing their thing, which meant that between 1971 and 1979, Man City did not lose at all to Tottenham Hotspur. In 14 games, they did not lose, and they won 10 of those games. So for almost a decade, Man City were whooping Tottenham Hotspur, like with no exceptions. So what you're seeing now is nothing compared to what was going on then. But outside of that period, it was pretty even between the two teams. And that means that in phase 1, the First Division era, Man City were the ones who were victorious. They had a winning record of 46 wins, 28 draws, and 33 losses. But the Premiership era, phase 2, the Premiership era changed all of that, as Man City saw arguably their worst period in club history. They were trash. They were horrid. Man City stunk, bro. And if you were a Man City fan in those days, I feel sorry for you when people say, oh, you're a glory hunter now and you're only supporting them because of the money and this, that, and the other. Because for you to go through how bad Man City were back in the days, stick it through, see what's going on now, be happy just for people to discredit that because your team has got bread, I feel for you. The rest of you, man, allow it. But Man City, they had financial instability, chairman changing, managerial changes all the time, relegation, second tier, third tier, back up to second tier, back up to first tier, the Premiership, back down to the second tier. It was not looking good, Bev, at all. Meanwhile, Tottenham were doing their thing in the Premier League. Like, they weren't what they are now. They were kind of just mid-table. Maybe they'd have the odd season where they nearly make the Champions League, but someone poisons them through lasagna and they don't make it. Something I've covered on this channel, by the way. And maybe they'd have the odd season where they're struggling lower down in the league. But for the most part, they were a solid Premier League team. They were one of those teams that never got relegated, but never made Europe either. Or at least never made the Champions League. And as a result, they were pumping Man City pretty much every time they met. That being said, on 1st of September 2008, everything changed as Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi group, they took over Man City and they brought generational international bread with them as they invested in players that you would never see. You'd see them in Manchester. Maybe they even thought they were going to United. But Man City found a way to make them come to City. The likes of Robinho, the likes of Carlos Tevez, he knew where he was going. The likes of Adebayor, he knew where he was going and he knew where he left to. You would never see them in a Man City shirt when they were dwindling in the second and third tier of English football. But here they were, repping Man City. And they got Man City to a point in the league in which they were 1 game away from qualifying for the Champions League for the first time in their existence in the modern format of the Champions League. In the 2009-2010 season, they found themselves in 5th place with 66 points with just 2 games remaining, and all they had to do was win their penultimate game at home to all but secure Champions League football. But who were they going up against? Was it Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man U, any of the traditional top 4? No, because People born these days, the likes of Max Dowman, he probably doesn't even know what the top four is. He's been born into a world in which it's the top six because this happened in the season that he was born. And what happened here shifted the way that English football was viewed, as it wasn't only Man City that disrupted the traditional top four. It was also Tottenham Hotspur. Yes, they'd done it. They locked in and they wanted to right their wrongs from 2006, in which they lost on the final day, lost an opportunity to make it to the Champions League, and they found themselves in fourth place, 1 place ahead of Manchester City, 1 point ahead of Manchester City, going to Manchester City on the second last game of the season, knowing that one victory would secure them Champions League football. Tottenham had a team back then, by the way. They had Gareth Bale, Aaron Lennon, Peter Crouch, the man who ended up scoring the winning goal late in the game, securing the victory and the Champions League qualification for Tottenham on a very dry weeknight for Harry Redknapp, as Tottenham secured Champions League football. And that Tottenham victory, we should have seen it coming because yes, Man City had all the bread in the world. But Tottenham in the Premiership era, Premier League era, were dominant over them. In that period, from when the Premier League started in 1992 to 2010, the year in which Tottenham qualified for the Champions League, Tottenham had a winning record of 23 wins, 5 draws, and 4 losses. What? They absolutely dominated Man City, but would they be able to carry that into the next era? Phase 3, the Sheikh Mansour Era. Because yes, Man City had the money, but Tottenham, they had the momentum and they had Champions League football. And I'm not gonna lie, they did their thing there. By the way, Maicon, I'm sorry if you're watching this, yeah? I'm sorry for what you had to go through, for what Gareth Bale put you through. It wasn't right of him, okay? It wasn't fair. But unfortunately for Tottenham, despite having promising flashes, they did not manage to establish themselves as a Champions League team in the 2010s, not appearing again in the competition until 2016. Meanwhile, Manchester City established themselves as the most dominant team in English domestic football. Yes, they had all the money in the world to spend with, but we've seen many teams, particularly English teams, with all the money in the world to spend with that have not done so wisely. So credit where credit's due to Man City, because the likes of Vincent Kompany, Yaya Toure, David Silva, Sergio Aguero, Kevin De Bruyne, the list goes on. Very smart expenditure and club legends who brought Man City so much success in that period. And in that period, the tables turned. They were the ones dominating Tottenham. They were giving Tottenham the belt. 6-0, 5-1, 4-1, 5-1. Meaning that by 2019, the final year of the decade that started with Tottenham getting Champions League football over them. Since then, Man City had 11 wins, 2 draws, 4 losses over Tottenham Hotspur. Domestic dominance, FA Cups, League Cups, Premier Leagues, that was great. But Man City, they felt as though they were destined for greater things. The Champions League was the one trophy that had eluded them. And in 2019, they had their sights set on that trophy, with Pep Guardiola at the helm. Standing in their way in the Champions League quarter-final, though, of course, was Tottenham. But that should be light work for Man City, right? They've spanked them so much in this 2010s period, this should just be another victory. Well, Tottenham won the first leg at home, 1-0 against Man City. And a 1-goal deficit seems like something that Man City could overcome quite easily. But the problem was not the size of the deficit. The problem was that they did not score. Because back in the day, away goals used to matter a lot. If two teams were tied in a Champions League 2-legged tie, the tiebreaker was the away goal. So losing 1-0 to Tottenham put Man City in a difficult position. And they knew they had to go all out to get the win over Tottenham. But Tottenham knew the value of the away goal. And what resulted was arguably the greatest Champions League quarterfinal tie of all time, in which Tottenham and Spurs, Tottenham and Man City were going ban for ban throughout the entire game. And at the end, Raheem Sterling bagged, and he thought he'd won it. But that year, we were introduced for the first time in European football to our friend VAR. So we weren't used to the feeling of, oh, we just scored, but let's just chill out because we don't know whether or not it's going to count or not. Sterling's running around, Guardiola's gas, the stadium's erupted. They don't know what's around the corner, which is that VAR disallows the goal. And Tottenham go through after losing 4-3 at the Etihad, so that's another dub for Man City. They won the battle, but they lost the war. as the game was tied on aggregate 4-4 and Tottenham went through to the Champions League semi-final and eventually through to the final. That is my favorite Champions League season in history. So if anyone wants to deep dive into that, subscribe and you may just get one. But that ending to the 2010s period set the precedence for what we were about to see phase 4, the 2020s, a decade in which Man City continued their dominance on a domestic level, even managed to finally get to the top of European football. But Tottenham, that old foe that they'd been linked with since, World War One days, Tottenham would always thwart them in their tracks. Despite Tottenham low-key falling off in that period. I mean, their league finishes were becoming a lot more unstable. Champions League was no longer a guarantee for Tottenham. They lost their talisman Harry Kane. They finished 17th last year, their lowest ever finish in the Premier League. And despite that, Tottenham won 4-0 against Man City at the Etihad in their worst Premier League season ever. A season in which they easily could have got relegated if it wasn't for the discrepancy between the Premier League and the Championship. That means that in this current decade, Tottenham have a winning record of 8 wins, 1 draw, and 6 losses over Man City. And in the Premier League alone this decade, 7 wins, 1 draw, and 4 losses. Despite Man City's clear dominance in domestic football, Tottenham still have the edge over them this decade. Why is that? Now, I'm going to give my own theory, but I'd love to hear from you guys what you think the reason is for this. Because in the previous 3 phases that I just outlined and went into, there were reasons outside of the context of that particular matchup for the team's performances, whether that was financial instability, relegation, new owners, whatever it may be. There were reasons for the discrepancy between the two teams whenever they occurred. Now, it doesn't make sense. Man City, the more dominant than they've ever been, richer than they'd ever been. Tottenham, off the back of their worst season ever in the Premier League, unstable in this period, are dominating them, at least relative to every other team that faces Man City from England. So what do you think the reason is for this? I personally believe that Man City are a very difficult team for any style of club to beat. Even the big clubs, we see them park the bus against Man City because they're so dominant in possession, particularly in the Pep era, that it's like if you try play them at your own game, which a lot of the big clubs are also dominant in possession, but not to the same extent as Man City. So if you try play them in their own game, you will lose because as well as they are keeping possession, they're also good at harrying opposing players and getting them out of possession. So a lot of the big teams revert to playing a more defensive style against City, which can work and has worked, particularly in last year. But ultimately, on a consistent basis, Man City are going to win more games than not if that's how you try play them. And then when it comes to the small teams, it's a wrap. They're so dominant that yes, you can get the odd win over Man City, but 9 times out of 10, they will beat you, if not destroy you. Now, Tottenham fall in between, particularly with their personnel over the last 5-6 years. As one of the top clubs financially in the league, they have quality players, but they don't always play in the same way that the other top teams play. They have been good at counter-attacking, just like soaking up pressure, scoring on the counter, particularly when they had Kane and Son, and even with the other players that they have now. When they're at their best, it has not been that they've just been dominating teams, playing them off the park. They've just been clinical in transition and managed to pick their moments. Their inability sometimes to dominate games, particularly against smaller teams, is why they found themselves in the position that they found themselves last season. But even when in that situation, when they were playing against a team like Man City, it was almost as if it suited their style of play more. And I think the same is the case now. Tottenham have the perfect balance of play style and personnel to take it to Man City every single time. And Man City and Pep Guardiola, despite the tactical genius that he is, have not figured out how to counter that. And until that occurs, we're going to be seeing more of the same in these matchups between Man City and Tottenham. Where Spurs have not been as dominant, however, is in the transfer market, in which Arsenal made a last-ditch effort to snatch Eberechi Eze from them and bring him back home. Make sure to subscribe for a documentary on Eze's career. Also, let me know your thoughts on the entire timeline that I've just shared with you and why you think Tottenham have the edge over Man City in this current era. Make sure to follow my TikTok at Luke Oko, Instagram at OKO TV for more content like this. My name's Luke Okosieme. Thanks for watching OKO TV. It's been real.